Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe right this second to this channel. Justice Brett Kavanaugh appeared sympathetic to the former president's argument that criminal statutes do not apply to the president unless they say so specifically. This is the Supreme Court website. They stated that Kavanaugh backed Trump on immunity. Trump is going to get a huge immunity victory, like I told you, for the past couple of months pertaining to the special counsel cases. Those will be completely dismantled. The Supreme Court, and hit subscribe, backed Trump 9-0 in a unanimous manner, like I said, and you will hear from Judge Kavanaugh. You will hear from President Trump in a couple of seconds. But within the next couple of months, this has to go to the Supreme Court because the appellate division within New York, the New York Court of Appeals, it could take over a year to 2 years, in which case Democrats in New York could prevent Trump from campaigning. They could even jail him. They could even force him to be in house arrest in Mar-a-Lago. And that's blatantly unconstitutional, just like the Colorado ban was blatantly unconstitutional. Hit subscribe. Let's listen to Trump right now. Then we'll get to Judge Kavanaugh. He'll side with Justices Alito and Justices Thomas and Amy Coney Barrett, who was a law clerk, I believe, for Antonin Scalia, Gorsuch, and then Roberts also will back Trump on this. They'll overturn, and here's why Kavanaugh and all the other justices, the conservative justices, will overturn this absurd state guilty verdict. The state of New York relied on the Department of Justice and federal statutes and the FEC to claim that Trump broke federal laws. The FEC dropped the case. The FEC decided to fine Clinton and the DNC for purchasing the Steele dossier. They did not fine Trump. They dropped the case. They looked at the hush money. They could not find a federal statute or law that he broke, because he did not break a federal statute. That's why he's breaking campaign fundraising records right now. And we'll get to Kavanaugh in a second. Hit subscribe. The Supreme Court, this is within the purview, within the authority, within the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, because the state of New York relied on federal laws that are non-existent in this case. He did not break a federal law because a personal expenditure that would have taken place with or without a campaign, it's not a campaign finance issue. It's not breaking the law. He could have paid Stormy with his own personal checkbook. It wouldn't be breaking the law, according to Hans A. von Spakovsky and Bradley Smith. And Bradley Smith is a former FEC chairman. So is Hans A. von Spakovsky. You'll hear him in a second. They both state Trump did not break the law. On the other hand, Hillary Clinton's campaign did break the law. And the Democratic National Committee did break the law for buying a dossier full of lies and information that misinforms. They care so much about information that misinforms from a foreign operative. Once again, Democrats doing the exact opposite of what they claim to uphold. Hit subscribe. This is President Trump right now.
Last night, we just got a report this morning. In the history of politics, I believe, maybe I'm wrong, somebody will find that I'm wrong, maybe, but I don't think so. They raised with small money donors, meaning like $21, $42, $53, $38, a record $39 million in about a 10-hour period. No, think of that.
All right, I think it was 34.8 million, but who's arguing there? The bottom line is that the former president, since getting convicted on these 34.
Only in politics in 2024. And every day is a countdown to victory, November 5th, 2024. Every day is a countdown to victory on this channel. Thank God. God willing, we'll get Trump back in the Oval Office. He will win. I'm telling you, he's going to win. Democrats have pretty much zero chance to win. They can try to jail him, and Lord knows what else they'll try. They actually are the true despots, authoritarians, tyrants, and totalitarians they claim Trump embodies, or that they claim Trump of being. But Nicholas Orm in Australia, thank you, as always, Nicholas and Paul. To my Australian crew, thank you so very, very much. So greatly appreciated. To my viewers in Australia and around the world, in the Philippines, in New Zealand, UK, Canada, Nigeria, and Korea, everywhere around the world. Nepal, thank you so very much for watching. Let's continue.
Accounts. Hasn't hurt him money-wise. It's helped him. Hal Lambert, not surprised, the former Ron DeSantis donor, now a very big donor to one Donald Trump, Point Bridge Capital founder and CEO. He can write out a single check for $34.8 million if he wanted to, but he's very good at getting others to do that as well. So Hal, there's no denying the fact that this, agitated a lot of Donald Trump supporters, and many maybe who weren't, to the point that they're giving a lot of money. Now, how long do you see this continuing?
Well, I think it's going to continue for quite a while. I mean, I had multiple friends actually texting me last night with screenshots of the website down. They were trying to go in and contribute.
Was that
and
the problem?
website was
so
down.
Many were trying to do it. They actually sent the thing down.
That's exactly what happened. So I think the money's going to keep going. People that couldn't give last night are now up and running and giving today. So that number's going to grow. And I think it really shows a lot, Neil, about what people view this verdict as, and they view it as a trial that should have never happened. You don't hear any announcements from the Biden side about everybody rushing to contribute to him now that this has happened to Donald Trump. So this is all the energy is on the Republican side on this, and as well it should be, because Joe Biden. You talked about this earlier on inflation. The average American is poorer now than they were when he was elected. So.
It is double in terms of mortgage rates. If you buy a home in Biden's America, you're paying twice the mortgage as you were. With Trump, it was like 3%. With Biden, it's 6 to 7%, or around 7%. So more than double. And so you're literally paying more. You're paying double in your mortgage payments because of mean tweets. You have endless foreign policy catastrophes because of mean tweets. Trump wrote mean tweets, so therefore you must pay double in terms of mortgage payments. You must pay more in the grocery and at the gas station, and poverty has gone up. We had record low poverty with Trump, record highs in household median income. Inflation was like less than 3%, always less than 3%, with interest rates. Like I said, mortgage rates were around 3%. And now you have everything from car payments. If you want to buy a new car, if you want to buy a house, you're going to be paying double because Trump was mean to Democrats, or he was rude. And the way the Democratic Party works, and the way liberal Democrats and wonderful left-leaning pundits and voters, they don't like Trump's personality, so they will try to ban him in the Colorado Supreme Court ruling around the country, remove him from contention, and the Supreme Court unanimously offered a rebuke, overturned that. Even liberal justices in a 9-0 Supreme Court, devastating defeat for Democrats. They're going to defeat the immunity deal they're going to give Trump a huge victory on immunity. I told you that. And I told you about the 9-0 Supreme Court ruling before it even took place. And I'm telling you, they're going to overturn an unconstitutional New York guilty verdict predicated upon an imaginary federal statute that Trump did not break. Trump did not break any federal election laws. We know this because the FEC did not fine Trump. The FEC actually stated that Clinton's campaign and the Democratic National Committee broke laws because they purchased the Steele dossier full of lies, so much so that even Michael Cohen was suing BuzzFeed. They purchased the Steele dossier with campaign money, and that thrust the country into a Cold War, liberal Cold War, McCarthy-era hysteria.
Are gas prices lower today than they were yesterday? Are food prices lower today than they were yesterday after the verdict?
That's galvanizing. It's about the economy. It'll return it about the economy. But Hal, you were a former Ron DeSantis donor. Ron DeSantis has said, do we want someone who could be a convicted felon as our nominee? Well, now you have a convicted felon as your nominee. Does that worry you?
No, actually it doesn't at this junction, because Those charges, as we know, I mean, it's 34 counts. A lot of it is the same over and over because of the contributions he was making to his attorney, or the expenses he was giving his attorney to pay Stormy Daniels. So,
right. So you don't think this will put any dent in his popularity, reaching out to independents, maybe undecideds, that his base is strong, but that the progress he was making with women and minorities, you don't think that will be at least slowed by this?
No, I mean, people view this as a travesty. They really do. And Neil, that's what separates the United States from the rest of the world. This is more than Trump, and people realize it. Independents realize this is more than Trump. We're known as the rule of law nation. That's why we're the reserve currency of the world. No one trusts China. They're not going to make China the reserve currency. No one trusts Russia. There's problems in Latin America. There's problems in Africa and Southeast Asia because they don't have rule of law. We've always had it. And this is a real crack in that because people see it for what it is. It's a political attack that's been going on since 2016. This isn't a one-off. Right. They've seen this going on for the last 7-8 years.
Well,
so, ladies and gentlemen, the misdemeanors in New York were about record keeping. What they said was that Trump broke the law because he paid Michael Cohen and he deliberately knew that he was breaking campaign finance laws. It's not even a violation of campaign finance laws to pay Stormy from his own checkbook, because any expenditure that would have taken place with or without an actual run for the presidency is not viewed as breaking the law. So if you purchase a Steele dossier like Clinton and the Democratic National Committee for the specific purpose of influencing 2016 and beyond, and you use campaign funding as they were cheating Bernie Sanders in a complete hoax of a primary. Anyway, that's another story. Democrats pontificate about democracy. They don't even have a functioning primary. But as they used money from the campaign to purchase a Steele dossier specifically for the intent of influencing 2016 and beyond, that is a campaign finance. They're breaking campaign finance laws because they would not have purchased a Steele dossier from a foreign intelligence agent were it not for 2016. There's no time in Clinton's life or in the DNC's existence that they would need to purchase a compilation of lies and deceit and gossip and complete fabricated nonsense that Democrats believe all the time. The only reason they purchased the Steele dossier with campaign funding was to influence 2016. That's what makes it a crime, or that's what makes it a fine. Okay, that's why they broke the law. That's why they paid a fine by the FEC. The reason the FEC dropped the case, the reason the Department of Justice did not level any charges against Trump, the reason the FEC, the Federal Election Committee, did not even fine Trump was because, like I said, and like Hans A. von Spakovsky and like Bradley Smith stated, if he paid Stormy with his own checkbook, he would have done so at any point because celebrities do that all the time. It's legal. There's no law broken. It's a non-disclosure agreement. And if anyone was breaking the law, it's very likely Stormy asking for money or, breaking the non-disclosure and then asking for money. It's called extortion. So if you get the money, you sign it, you get the money, and you promise not to say anything, and then go and you say, well, give me more money, or else I'll break the non-disclosure. That's called extortion. But anyway, the issue is that he purchased he paid Stormy, let's say, and he would have done that just like celebrities have done that all the time. They're not running for president. So that's what makes it, if it's an expenditure that would have taken place with or without a campaign, where it's not directly tied to the campaign, even if it helps the campaign, even if he intended also to help his campaign while at the same time wanting to protect Melania or his brand or his family, that still doesn't make it a campaign finance issue. That's what former FEC chairman stated. But let's go ahead and listen to Trump's amazing lawyer here talking about the Supreme Court, Alina Habba.
And this is just, a thing, to get the statement out there. Trump's a convicted felon because they know they're going to get it overturned on appeal.
Right.
I mean, Harvey Weinstein's conviction was overturned by the New York Appeals Court, but that wasn't until 4 years later. Do you guys plan to go to as high as the Supreme Court?
If we have to, we will. We have no problem with that. As you know, we've taken those matters that we think are incredibly important to validating and preserving the Constitution that our country was made on. There were incredible constitutional violations in this whole proceeding, including the current gag order that's on me, the president, and anybody that works for him. It's crazy. So, look, if we care about America, we have to fight for it. And his legal team is prepared to do so in whatever way we need to do.
Show what Ellie Honig said, that this was a contortion and really a twisting of the law here. It was an ill-conceived, unjustified mess, this case. The critics are saying this is a political case. It would not have happened to anyone else in America if their name was not Trump. The danger now is the New York justice system is in the zone of having its integrity destroyed for political purposes. This case is about Biden, way behind in the polls, abusing the legal system. That top DOJ official left his powerful number 3 job in Biden's DOJ to go after Trump in a local case with a pro-Biden judge who donated to causes like Stop Republicans and a DA who literally campaigned on getting Trump.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it better myself. Honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's 100% true. I think it's a sad thing for our country, to be honest, when you see this kind of desperation, when you see an administration who should be focused on running the country. Instead, their focus is completely and totally on trying to take down President Trump because he has no loyalty to anybody but America. He can't be bought. Everybody knows that. He put America first. Everybody knows that. And we've got a president that today smirked in front of the camera. I mean, that says it all. The smirk to me is louder than his words. It's louder than anything else. It's not louder than the White House logs that show that state constituent DAs and AGs are visiting the White House. All of this put together says one thing. We are in trouble and we need to act now. That is November. President Trump said it. November 5th will be the real verdict, and I stand beside that.
Alina, what about this? Trump lawyer Todd Blanche told Jesse Waters that prosecutors from DA Bragg's office were meeting with witnesses and talking about reviving this case starting way back in 2018. The DOJ and FEC had dropped it. And boom, when Trump announced he was...
The DOJ and the FEC dropped the case. There was no case because he did not break any federal laws. And by the way, the statute of limitations and the misdemeanors in New York, they expired. And they still convicted Trump, even though there's no federal crime, which brings this under the purview of the Supreme Court.
Running for re-election in 2022, then DA Bragg launches it. What do you think?
I think it's obvious. First of all, it wasn't just DA Bragg. It was Cy Vance first. He said no. Cy Vance says no. DA Bragg says no. Mark Pomerantz, who they had come to handle this case, who is a friend of the Clintons and everybody else, comes in, is angry that they didn't bring the charges, leaves, writes a book about it, and they still don't bring it. When did they bring the charges? The minute President Trump said he was running for office. That's when they indicted him. This was past the statute of limitations. It is 8 years old. All rules don't apply when you're Trump. For crying out loud, Hochul made a rule. She made a law. The Adult Survivors Act.
Thank you so much, Samuel Stafford. Thank you. My goodness. Samuel, Nicholas, thank you so much to my super chat. Thank you. And so that's Alina Habba is 100% right. They are trying desperately to go after Trump for political purposes in a blue city, in a blue state, with Democrats running the entire show. It's interesting to point out also when liberal Democrats or left-leaning people bring up, oh, well, Trump tried to wrongfully convict young people in the 90s. It was Democrats that did that. Trump paid for a full-page ad in the Times, did not mention the people who were wrongfully convicted. And it was a Democratic court, prosecutors, mayor. Tammany Hall was running the place like it always does. And again, it's like you could look. They could not even get a grand jury to indict in New York a liberal Democratic donor who owned, let's say, a piece of property in the ocean. We'll leave it at that. They couldn't even get him indicted until long after his crimes. But Trump, record keeping, oh my God, the end of the world, Al Capone.
That it was a foregone conclusion there'd be a conviction. A biased judge, a biased jury, a biased prosecutor, a man who ran for office on the theory of let's find the crime to prosecute Trump for, and they couldn't find the crime, so they made it up. We're now a day after the verdict. I've known criminal law. I've been involved in criminal law 60 years. I still don't know what the crime is.
Right.
There is no crime. There's no federal crime. That's why the Supreme Court has to get involved. They literally convicted Trump on misdemeanors that had already expired the statute of limitations and made up an imaginary federal crime that even Biden's Department of Justice didn't level at Trump. And they've leveled completely baseless indictments against him. They couldn't even find a federal law that he broke in terms of campaign finance, because the laws don't apply to a personal expenditure to Stormy. They don't. That's because it would have taken place at any point in the life of any celebrity. It only counts as breaking federal laws if you purchase, for example, a Steele dossier specifically to ruin 2016 and to investigate Trump, full of lies. Democrats just completely make up stories about Trump. They do this all the time. It's hearsay and gossip. But then when you have a person in Congress testifying pertaining to Clinton's foundation and a sale of uranium, oh, it's just gossip and hearsay. But a dossier they purchased was literally full of lies. Okay. That's legitimate cause to begin investigations, and also, by the way, campaign finance issue, and they were fined by the FEC, whereas Trump was not fined by the FEC.
Right.
Was he found guilty of intending to violate tax laws, to violate the federal election laws, to defraud the voters? I still don't know, and we're a day after this. This is the most outrageous case. You know, everybody knows the quote from Lavrenti Beria, the head of the KGB, and Stalin, when Beria said to Stalin,
show me the man and I'll show you the crime.
No, I'll find you the crime.
Find you the crime, yeah.
Tried to find the crime, and he couldn't. So he made up the crime. He took it a step further than Stalin and Lavrenti Beria. This case will go down in history as one of the most abusive prosecutions since the trial of Aaron Burr back in 18 whatever. This is a stain on our criminal justice
system. It really is.
system.
And by the way, you're not the only liberal Democrat saying that. We had this interesting piece that was in the New York Magazine, of all places, by a CNN analyst, Elie Honig. I don't know if you saw it, came out this morning. He says the charges against Trump are obscure and nearly entirely.
Samuel Stafford again, thank you. Nicholas, thank you so very, very much, as always. To my super chat, thank you.
Unprecedented, in fact, as you say, made up. No state prosecutor in New York or Wyoming or anywhere has ever charged federal election laws as a direct or predicate state crime against anyone for anything.
And by the way, if a state wants to indict somebody, they can indict, obviously, for breaking state laws, and the DOJ also levels federal charges, and you are then a criminal would be convicted of breaking both state and federal laws. Trump was not convicted of breaking state and federal laws. He was convicted of breaking state laws, and then they said somehow, some way he broke federal laws. We just don't know which ones. That's the Supreme Court is made for this type of unconstitutional behavior. Democrats pontificate, oh my God, about the rule of law, and everyone on the planet sees what's going on. Just like everyone on the planet, when Mashed Potato Brain speaks, everyone knows what's going on.
None ever. So you're not the only liberal Democrat who believes that. I just wonder how many other folks out there who used to be against Trump are now in his favor.
I can tell you, I get calls, whispered calls from liberal Democrat friends of mine saying, you're 100% right, but I won't say it publicly because I'm so thrilled that Trump got convicted, even though the conviction was outrageous. You get a lot of liberals who believe with Ellie Honig and me that this is an unjustified conviction. We're willing to say it, but they're not willing to say it. And there's dancing on the streets. And there are people who are just, I get these emails. They're so thrilled that we violated the Constitution in order to get Trump. I have people telling me getting Trump elected is worse than undoing the Constitution. That's how extreme some of these people are. And, you know, it's not only this case, it's the three other cases. I go over each of them in my book, Get Trump. And every single one of them is based on conceptions that are in violation of the rule of law. This was the weakest case. This was the worst case, but it was in a very good jurisdiction.
But even Professor Dershowitz, did you imagine in your book or even a few weeks ago that the judge himself would bring so much of that prejudice? People are allowed to have their opinions. People are allowed to be inconsistent, but the judge...
You have judges literally giving to the Democratic Party, and then they want Alito to recuse himself because of a homeowners association issue, something absurd like that, or because Clarence Thomas sold property to a billionaire, something like that. And it's like, oh, okay, so Hunter's laptop is not a conflict of interest where 50 intel officials lie through their teeth and there's literally emails asking for influence. And he's on the board of directors of a shady energy company in a country that eventually gets invaded while Biden's in office. But, oh, no conflict of interest. And they want conservative justices to recuse themselves for something that is things that are completely irrelevant to court cases. And it's not like Alito or Thomas literally donated to the Republican Party. Judges in charge of Trump's cases are literally donating to PACs, political action committees for Democrats. And they don't see anything wrong with that.
Is supposed to keep prejudice out of the courtroom. And his instructions to the jury, I've never seen anything like it. Somebody just called it a roadmap to conviction, which is essentially what it was. The judge is supposed to be neutral, if anything, on the side of the defense, because it's the prosecution that has to prove that something has been done illegally. But in this case, he was providing the jury with a road to conviction, was he not?
Yes. In fact, the day before the conviction, I wrote a column saying this was a directed verdict by the judge, that the judge was directing the jury to convict. And by the way, he didn't have to. The jury would have convicted anyway. Once the jury was selected from New York voters, 85% of whom don't want to see Trump as their president, the die was cast. This case should have been tried in a different county. It should have been tried in Staten Island or in Rockland County, where you get some chance of getting a fair.
Talked about it, but he went pretty far in testing out the limits of the gag order, where he was allowed to go, talking clearly about a couple of people that he's not allowed to mention by name, but one of whom was Michael Cohen. And the really obnoxious thing that happened, I think certainly grounds for appeal, was the prosecution saying that because Michael Cohen had a plea deal that involved election interference, that necessarily meant that Trump was guilty of election interference. The judge originally said he wasn't going to allow that suggestion to be made, but the prosecution made it. And when the defense objected to it, that objection was overruled by the judge.
Michael Cohen pled guilty to crimes that he didn't commit. Because Michael Cohen, and one of the viewers explained to me, okay, Michael Cohen had, first of all, he withheld $4 million, $3 to $4 million from the IRS. Huge problem. You're going to get in big trouble if you make $3 to $4 million and you don't tell the IRS. Okay. But he had taxi medallions, Michael Cohen, and his taxi medallions plummeted because of Uber. And one of the viewers said, HA, it's, the existing taxi companies, the city wouldn't allow them to develop an app, something like that. But had they simply developed an app to compete with Uber, those taxi medallions would be worth a lot more than they are now. The problem was Michael Cohen spent who knows how much, millions and millions on taxi medallions. Very bad investment right before Uber. Probably one of the worst investments you could make right before Uber and Lyft. Then he got caught with financial crimes and trying to defraud banks. Then prosecutors in New York said, you're going to go away for a long time to the big house, or you can turn on Trump. Then he turned on Trump. And all the while, there was no federal crime committed because FEC chairman stated in 2018, Hans-A von Spakovsky, Bradley Smith, the FEC itself did not fine anyone, Michael Cohen or Trump, because it was not a campaign finance violation. They didn't break the law. Like I said, the people who broke the law were the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign, and they paid a fine for purchasing the Steele dossier. But this is interesting. Hold on one second.
Well, I think you have to look to an appeal. And, higher court judges in New York, Sean, are just like Mershon. I mean, they're mini-me's. This is a liberal, politically driven club. They protect their own.
That's why the Supreme Court will get involved. The appeals court in New York could very well uphold the guilty verdict. And the Supreme Court would then say, well, where's the federal crime? We're going to overturn this. This is so blatantly unconstitutional. They got to do it quick, though.
So I'm not optimistic at the former president's chances to overturn the conviction, which means that Trump's only real relief is in the federal courts. But that's the proper venue anyway, because as Jonathan pointed out, most of the egregious violations by the judge, these were constitutional due process rights, for example, refusing to tell the defendant what this conspiracy crime was. We still don't know. That's a clear violation of the Sixth Amendment. And then, of course, tell them.
Can you believe, ladies and gentlemen, we still don't know what the federal crime is? We have no clue from the federal statute that Trump broke, how he broke it, and why it was against the law. Why is he being charged with a federal crime when nobody knows what the federal crime is? Can somebody explain that to me?
The jury, they can forget all about unanimity. That is a bedrock constitutional right derived from the Sixth and Seventh Amendment. Judge Mershon made a mockery of that, as well as justice, with a multitude of reversible errors that are quite shocking, I think, to everyone. And it's not, it is the federal courts, not state courts, that they're the ones who tend to scrupulously guard our due process rights. So, there may be a dual track here. You've got to go through the state system. Maybe you'll get lucky and, some judges with a conscience who are schooled in the law will look at this and say, this is fundamentally wrong, we reverse. But I think in the end, it's going to be the federal courts, maybe even the Supreme Court, that corrects this incredible injustice.
Yeah, let's get your take, Professor. And what would the next steps be for you if you were talking to President Trump's attorneys?
I would do something quite radical. I would move immediately for the sentencing to occur next week, not July 11th, so that you can get the appeal going. You can't appeal until there's a sentence. If the court refused to expedite the sentencing, I would try to take the case now immediately to the New York Court of Appeals, skipping the Intermediate Court of Appeals, which is a political court, Manhattan-based, Democrats largely. I would try to go right to the Court of Appeals and ask them for a decision within 30 days in order to get to the Supreme Court before the election. There's no reason to have the sentencing delay.
God willing, they get to the Supreme Court before November 5th. They get to the Supreme Court. It is a monumental, historic win for Trump, just like when I said they would overturn the Colorado ban. 9-0. You might even get a liberal justice backing Trump. It could be 7-2. You think the justices don't know this is political? What person on this planet doesn't understand? You don't have to be a brilliant Supreme Court justice. Both the liberals and conservatives are brilliant, highly educated, intelligent people. They know the Constitution. Do you think even the liberal justices agree with this? Of course they don't. This is even more egregious than the Colorado ban, which is the most unconstitutional thing you could think of. This is even worse. And that was a 9-0 Supreme Court victory. So a rebuke of liberal Democrats. And I mean, you would think also, like the Colorado Supreme Court justices, you would think they do know the Constitution, you would think. But then they got a complete 9-0 unanimous rebuke from the United States Supreme Court. So, I mean, what do you think the Supreme Court's going to do with this? We don't even have a federal law the man broke. He literally didn't break a federal law, and they convicted him for federal crimes. Nicholas! Thank you so much, Nicholas and Samuel. Thank you. Thank you, Nicholas. An incredible injustice sounds about right. I agree with you.
Delayed until July 11th. The judge knows what he's going to do today.
Professor, why would you have any confidence that Judge Mershon would expedite the sentencing? Because I have, to me, I think the obvious thing to do if it was him would be to say, all right, you're released on your own recognizance pending appeal. I don't have faith he'll do that.
No, that's not the point. The point is to impose the sentence now so that there can be an appeal. If the judge refuses, as he would, take the case to the Court of Appeals and say, Your Honors, we want the sentencing to be done now so we can appeal. If the judge refuses to allow the sentencing to impose, Your Honors, let us appeal now. We're not going to appeal necessarily the sentencing now. We're going to appeal the conviction. So I would do everything to expedite this. Timing.
There is a very good likelihood that they're going to try to send Trump to jail, either house arrest or an actual jail. So which would mean also that the entire Secret Service would be with him 24/7. He would probably get like an entire level of the jail, or it's likely going to be house arrest. He shouldn't get anything. You have people out on bail after like criminal violent assaults in major cities, I believe including New York. But with Trump, with record keeping, big problem. Oh my God. And an imaginary invisible federal crime. So they might try to denigrate Trump and demean him and try to humiliate him. But at the end of the day, he just grows in popularity. People sympathize with Trump. The day he ever, God forbid, stepped foot into a jail for something that is not even a crime, whereas like Clinton, Biden, Hunter, Democrats routinely commit like major crimes with classified data and private servers and top secret intel illegally transferred onto servers, and Biden with obvious bribery and graft schemes. The Daily Mail and especially the New York Post broke the story. That's why 50 intel officials come out of the woodwork to cover up their crimes. If Trump ever went to jail, actually, with like 30 Secret Service, the fundraising record would be unbelievable. I mean, he'd win November 5th right then and there by a landslide. He's already going to win in a landslide. But the point is, the Supreme Court needs to get involved tomorrow. I wouldn't even go to the appeals court. I would just go straight to the Supreme Court and ask them. Maybe they would say, okay, we'll wait for the appeals court, but then that would be too long. Trump's lawyers must go to the Supreme Court tomorrow. Tomorrow. Do whatever it takes. Do whatever it takes to go to the Supreme Court. This is Hans A. von Spakovsky. Then we'll listen to Justice Kavanaugh. But listen to a Federal Election Commission chairman on this verdict.
I have the same reaction Francis Hakes does. This is a travesty, a miscarriage of justice. This was a phony prosecution from the very beginning. And for this jury, think about how many weeks this trial went on, how many witnesses came in, and in the very short time that the jury was out, they decided he was guilty on all 34 charges. This is a damage to the reputation of the American justice system like we have never seen. I have a colleague just got back from a conference overseas, and the reaction of lawyers and people there was that the United States has now gotten to be like the countries they are from, where the government uses its law enforcement powers to go after its political opponents. And
we know there was no crime because the FEC and the Department of Justice never leveled criminal charges against Trump. They leveled, the DOJ or the special counsel leveled a whole bunch of nonsense in terms of indictments. They didn't even touch the FEC laws. The FEC fined Clinton. They didn't fine Trump. They fined the DNC for purchasing the Steele dossier. There was no federal law. That's why we still don't know the federal law he broke, even after the verdict.
That, I think, is exactly what happened here.
Hans, what was the underlying federal campaign violation? Did we ever find that out?
Well, there was nothing in the original indictment about any kind of federal campaign violation. They kept saying that the legal expenses, which is what were listed in the business records, should have been a campaign-related expense, the payment that was made to Stormy Daniels. But as Brad Smith, I know, would have testified, under the test applied by the FEC, this was not a campaign-related expense, period. There's just no question about that. So for this jury to say that, oh, yeah, he violated federal campaign finance laws, and that justifies the underlying verdict, that is such an egregious mistake that at the Court of Appeals in New York, when they get this case, they ought to reverse this almost immediately because of this and so many other mistakes made in the case.
But they could very well uphold the verdict, which is why it has to go to the Supreme Court. Hans A. von Spakovsky is 100% right. And he's one of the people who wrote in 2018. He's a former Federal Election Commission chairman. This man, Bradley Smith, who was supposed to testify, another former federal FEC chairman, both of whom stated Trump did not commit a federal crime. We do not know what the federal crime was that he committed. We just know that they convicted him for misdemeanors that were elevated to felonies because of an imaginary federal crime.
How many do you count? How many mistakes?
I lost count of how many errors were made by this judge and by the prosecution. I mean, the judge let in all kinds of irrelevant evidence that had no bearing on the charges against the president, but were obviously there to blacken the character of Donald Trump. The judge shouldn't have even been on the case. He should have recused himself because of his personal family dealings, his daughter's involvement, his making political contributions in violation of the ethics rules in New York. There are just so many mistakes and errors he made that I don't see how a court of appeals could not overturn this verdict.
Ladies and gentlemen, when it gets to the Supreme Court, you'll have Justice Kavanaugh doing the same exact thing as Alito and Thomas and every other conservative, and even some liberal justices. I mean, it could be a 9-0 Supreme Court victory for Trump, overturning the new. Do you understand how livid, how apoplectic? Do you understand how delicious the apoplectic reaction would be? It would be like it would be like a supernova of liberal indignation. You would hear the indignation from across the universe, from New York. You'd be like 100 light years away. Like, aliens would be like, "Well, what was that?" Oh, the Supreme Court overturned Trump's conviction in New York. Okay, here's Kavanaugh.
Justice Kavanaugh?
Just follow up on the OLC opinions question. As you read them, and I think I read them, they articulate a clear statement rule as to this court's cases for covering official acts. And your point, I think, but I just want to underscore this, is that none of the statutes alleged here or cited here have a clear statement covering the president, therefore meaning that the president can't be charged for any official acts under these statutes.
That's absolutely correct. They're extended way beyond. I mean,
that's separate from the question what's official versus what's personal. But for that bucket that is official,
Kavanaugh is actually talking to Trump's lawyer here.
There's no clear statement, period.
That's right. And as to purely private conduct, we don't think that clear statement rule would be invoked. But as to official acts, these statutes, the ones charged in the indictment, are just way far afield from purporting to criminalize in clear terms the president's official acts.
And then just to clarify this, the president's not above the law. The president's not a king. The founders thought that. I think your point in response to that is the president is subject to prosecution for all personal acts, just like every other American for personal acts. The question is acts taken in an official capacity.
That's correct. And even those, of course, if there was an impeachment and conviction, could be prosecuted on our view. And we'd emphasize the whole series of structural checks in addition to that, which deter those and have successfully deterred presidential misfeasance for 234 years.
So we can go on forever. I put the wrong clip on. So I wanted to put the special counsel lawyer, and I accidentally put Trump's lawyer. But anyway, he eviscerates the special counsel lawyer and he backs Trump's lawyer, as you can see here. Justice Kavanaugh appeared sympathetic to the former president's argument that criminal statutes do not apply to the president unless they specifically say so. Kavanaugh will back Trump on immunity. He backed Trump overturning the Colorado ban. He will overturn, once it gets to the Supreme Court, this blatantly, overtly unconstitutional verdict. I mean, it's like unbelievable. But this is President Trump on the verdict right here.
Well, look, I'm fighting for the Constitution. I'm fighting for the same thing that you three. I watch you all the time, and same thing that you do. You fight for freedom. You fight for your country. These people are sick. They're sick. They're deranged. I talk about the enemy on the outside and the enemy from within. So you have Russia, you have China. But if you have a smart president, you always handle him quite easily, actually. We have a lot of advantages. But the enemy from within, they are doing damage to this country. They want open borders. They want high interest rates. They now want to quadruple your taxes. Quadruple. All my life I watched politics, and it was always like politicians want to lower taxes, not quadruple them. There's a whole sickness going on right now. So we're doing really well. It was a tough venue. We tried to get out of the venue. We tried to get out of the judge, but we tried to get out of both. Wouldn't even think about it. So we had maybe the worst area in the whole country for me, in terms of vote. I'm sure if I sat down and explained it to that section of the world, we could probably make progress. But one of the worst sections. And they always bring them in these sections, D.C., there, places where Republicans, not just me, Republicans get like virtually no votes. But the good news is that I think we've set a record beyond all records for fundraising. That's like a poll. And another one just came out just before I got in that were 6 points higher than we were before. So I don't know if that holds up. I mean, I'm just not sure. But people get it. It's a scam. And the Republican Party is really, they've stuck. They stick together in this. They see it's weaponization of the Justice Department.
If Nikki Haley or DeSantis or Mitt Romney or anyone, they would have indicted Mitt Romney on putting his dog on top of his car on a road trip, okay? They would have found some statute and tried to imprison Mitt Romney, Mittens, Pierre Romney. They would have indicted him and imprisoned him for putting his dog on top of his car, okay? And it's like they would have found something Nikki Haley did 30 years ago in South Carolina. They would have found something DeSantis did. Oh, they tried to get him on trafficking human beings, if you could believe that, when he sent people to Martha's Vineyard. No, yeah, Martha's Vineyard. And then the liberals gave them like cereal. They gave them Captain Crunch or Lucky Charms. And they were like, "Oh, look, what do we do now? I'm sorry, we can't help you." And it's like, "Oh, okay, now you know what Texas and Arizona and other states. Oh, okay, now, oh, you actually don't believe in the morally superior nonsense. When confronted with limited resources, you give them Lucky Charms. Okay, good. I don't know if you know what I'm referring to, but they literally gave the people that DeSantis sent to, I believe it was Martha's Vineyard, this like Costco size cereal container." And they're like, we can't eat cereal like 24/7. But anyway.
Of the FBI, and that's all coming out of Washington. You may think it's brag. Take a look at who opened the case. I'm not allowed to talk about it because I have a gag order. I'm probably, I guess, the first presidential nominee and the leading crooked Joe by a lot that's not allowed to talk. Maybe they're doing me a big favor. Who knows? But I'm not allowed to talk. I'm gagged. Nobody's ever heard of it. It's all coming out. It's weaponization, and it's a very dangerous thing. We've never had that in this country. They do have it in other countries, in South American countries. You know a little bit about it, right?
Well, that actually leads me to my question. I think for a lot of Americans, what's happened to you feels foreign. Like this has never happened here before.
Yeah.
But for Hispanic Americans, people coming from Latin America, this feels very familiar.
Yeah.
And in those countries, people are imprisoned. Instead of going to the ballot box and fighting there, they're on house arrest. They're told they can't run for office.
When I told Trump about this,
And by the way, I think a lot of Hispanic Americans, I hear from them, they're scared about what they see. What's your message to them about what happened to you and about how scared they are that our country is turning into the countries that they left behind, the corrupt, dysfunctional countries they left behind?
And they are scared, and they're great people, and very entrepreneurial, great energy. And as you know, I'm doing very well with them. I mean, beyond anybody, I don't think anybody's ever had polling.
Do you think this is why, a little bit?
I think a little bit. And they've always liked me, and I've always liked them. I've done well from the beginning. In 2016, I won the entire border along Texas, and they're all like 85%. And it's been great from the beginning, and now I'm leading. I think I'm leading over this guy that can't put two sentences together, that's destroying our country. Look, he's the worst president in the history of this country, and he's a danger to the country. And, they have misinformation. Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. It's just words. He doesn't even know what it means. But it's like their slogan, I'm a threat to democracy. I'm the opposite. They're the threat to democracy.
Mr. President, I want to return to the verdict, and I want to explore something you've said several times already in the conversation. You've referenced these people. I'm sure you've seen the video of Joe Biden when he was asked about the verdict, and he gave sort of a smirk to the camera.
Terrible. Remember, Bragg didn't want to do the case. He came out. He said, there's no case.
It's so obvious that this was a political stunt. You'd have to be a complete imbecile not to realize that Democrats are trying to get a public relations, a cheap, short-term, vapid public relations victory. Again, you'd have to be a complete and utter imbecile not to believe that, not to see this. But again, like everything they do, they're so inept with the economy and foreign policy. They convict Trump and he still makes more, he breaks a fundraising record. Like they can't touch him.
And how can you have a witness like so-and-so? I'm not allowed to mention the name. Can you believe this? This guy's allowed to have shows, television shows. I'm not allowed to mention the name. It's so unfair. But regardless, you know, you have to really play the hand that you're dealt. And then you had a jury that was, you know, from a certain persuasion. Would have been hard to do no matter what. But I did absolutely nothing wrong. I mean, absolutely. Think of it. You know, I hate when they say a bookkeeping, this and that. It's not. It's called, think of it, expense. I use the word expense. Legal expense. I pay a lawyer. He wasn't a fixer. He was a lawyer at the time.
They always make everything so grandiose. A Trump's fixer. His fixer. Oh! It's like, the Democrats only have fixers. That's how they purchased the Steele dossier and got a campaign finance fine from it, whereas Trump, like I said, did not get the FEC fine, and that's why the Supreme Court will get involved.
I pay a lawyer, and he's a lawyer. It's called legal expense. A bookkeeper, without ever speaking to me because she did the right thing, who's been with me for years, marks it down as legal expense. In other words, I paid a legal expense. It's marked down as a legal expense. They do that for this reason. They do that, all these salacious names that they put in of these people. And I'm not even allowed to defend myself because of a gag order. Think of it. But they put this stuff in to create havoc. These are bad people. I know everything they're doing. I know every move they make. I get it. But a lot of people don't. But it's tougher. I think it's probably, in many ways, it's tougher on my family than it is in me. You know,
how's Melania doing with it?
She's fine, but I think it's very hard for her. I mean, she's fine. But it's, you know, she has to read all this crap.
What about Barron? People started to focus on Barron recently.
He's amazing, actually, in a certain way. You know, he's tall, good-looking guy. He's a very good student. And he's...
So, Trump's family versus Biden's. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Biden. God bless Biden and his family and Hunter and all of them. Who would you pick? I'm just saying, like, go ahead. You look at Trump's family. They're successful. They love Trump. There's no, like, major, criminal issues. And then you look at Joe Biden's family and Hunter and even Biden's dog. Like, I think the dog bit like 20 plus people. Okay. Like, they don't, not only the economy and foreign policy, he doesn't even have a foothold on his pet. And then Hunter with the laptop, it's like beyond belief, the litany of criminal acts. And it's like Democrats are completely oblivious. They don't care. They want purely to attain political power. Anyway, hit subscribe to this channel, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you all. Thank you so very, very much. Samuel Stafford, as always. Nicholas, as always. Thank you. Paul Bartlett, everybody here. Thank you so very much, everyone. To my super chat around the world and in the U.S., thank you. It's going to the Supreme Court it's the equivalent of a grand slam. It's the equivalent of Kirk Gibson's homer in 1988 Game 1. It's the equivalent of it's that special. This Supreme Court ruling will be that special. Anyway, hit subscribe to this channel. I'll be back tomorrow at around 3 p.m. Eastern time. Be here. Hit subscribe. Thanks, everybody.